Hey everyone, welcome back. Tonight we're doing something a little different. We're talking castles, but not the Disney version with singing princesses and helpful mice. We're talking about the real thing. Stone fortresses built for war, drenched in hierarchy, and absolutely crawling with discomfort. Before we start, if you're enjoying the content, hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. And drop a comment below telling me where you're watching from and what the weather's like there right now. I'm always curious who's out there in the void with me. Now, grab a drink, get comfortable, and let's see how long you'd actually survive in one of history's most romanticized nightmares. Congratulations, you've just arrived at a medieval castle. Maybe you time traveled. Maybe you hallucinated after eating expired cheese. Either way, you're here, standing before towering stone walls that look impressive from a distance and deeply threatening up close. Let's establish something right away. You are not the Lord. You're not even the Lord's distant cousin who shows up drunk to Christmas dinner. You're a nobody. Statistically speaking, if you've been dropped into medieval Europe, you're a peasant, which means your relationship with this castle is going to be complicated, hierarchical, and almost entirely one-sided. First, let's talk about what a castle actually is. It's not a cozy stone mansion. It's a military installation. A fortress designed to withstand sieges, house soldiers, and project the Lord's power across the surrounding countryside. According to architectural historians, European castles evolved from simple wooden motte and bailey structures in the 10th century to massive stone fortifications by the 12th and 13th centuries. By the 14th century, when castle construction peaked, these structures could house hundreds of people during peacetime and thousands during war. You approach the gatehouse, a massive fortified entrance with murder holes above you. Those aren't decorative. They're literally holes in the ceiling, designed so defenders can drop rocks, boiling water, or heated sand onto attackers. And yes, that includes you if you're not supposed to be here. Assuming you're allowed and maybe you're delivering grain. Maybe you're here to beg for work. Maybe you're just lost. You pass through the portcullis, a heavy iron gate that can be dropped without warning to trap enemies in the gateway. It weighs hundreds of pounds and is operated by a mechanism you don't understand. One wrong move from the guards above, and you're a medieval pancake. The smell hits you first. Even from outside, castles reek. A blend of smoke, livestock, unwashed humanity, and the contents of chamber pots that have been emptied from windows into the moat or the surrounding area. The moat, by the way, isn't the crystal clear water feature from movies. According to archaeological evidence from sites like the Tower of London, moats were often stagnant, filled with sewage, dead animals, and garbage. Some castles didn't even have water-filled moats, just dry ditches filled with stakes to impale attackers. You're in the outer bailey now, the courtyard between the outer walls and the inner keep. It's crowded, loud, and chaotic. Chickens scatter. A blacksmith hammers somewhere. Soldiers drill in formation. Servants rush past, carrying buckets, bundles of wood, and baskets of God knows what. No one acknowledges you because why would they? You're not important. The ground beneath your feet is mud, animal droppings, and rotting straw. Your modern shoes are worse. Your bare medieval feet are already filthy. You've been here 5 minutes, and you're already regretting every decision that led to this moment. Welcome to castle life. You haven't even made it inside yet. Before we go any further, we need to talk about where you fit in the castle's social order. Spoiler, you're at the bottom, which means your experience is going to be significantly worse than anyone else's. Medieval castles operated on a rigid feudal hierarchy, and that hierarchy determined everything: where you slept, what you ate, whether you lived or died. At the very top, the lord or castellan, the guy who owns or controls the castle. He answers to a higher noble or the king, but within these walls, his word is law. He has a private chamber, eats the best food, and gets to make all the terrible decisions that affect everyone below him. Below him, knights and nobles, the warrior elite who train for combat, participate in tournaments, and enjoy relative comfort. They have actual beds, meet more than once a week, and the privilege of violence without immediate consequences. Then come the household officials, the steward who manages the estate, the marshal who oversees the stables and horses, the chamberlain who controls access to the lord, and the constable who commands the garrison. These are the middle managers of feudalism, and while they're not nobility, they have power, which in medieval terms means they eat regularly and sleep indoors. Next, craftsmen and skilled workers, the blacksmith, the armorer, the carpenter, the stonemason. These people have actual skills the castle needs, so they're treated with a modicum of respect. Not a lot, but more than you'll get. Below them, soldiers and men-at-arms. They're expendable but necessary, so they get fed, housed in the barracks, and occasionally paid. Their job is to stand on cold walls, patrol in the rain, and die first during sieges. And finally, at the absolute bottom, unskilled laborers, servants, and you. Your job is to do whatever the people above you don't want to do, which is basically everything. You'll be hauling water, mucking out stables, emptying chamber pots, and scrubbing floors that haven't been clean since the castle was built. According to records from 14th century English castles, a major fortress might house anywhere from 50 to 300 people in peacetime, and that number could swell to over 1,000 during war. Most of those people were not living comfortably. Archaeological excavations at castles like Conwy in Wales and Chateau Galliard in France reveal cramped servants' quarters, minimal heating, and sanitation systems that were, charitably speaking, inadequate. Your sleeping arrangement? Probably a spot on the floor in the Great Hall if you're lucky, or a corner of the stables if you're not. No privacy, no security, no dignity. But hey, at least you're inside, for now. Let's talk about the castle itself, because the building you're trapped in was designed to keep enemies out and make everyone inside vaguely uncomfortable, albeit for different reasons. Medieval castles were built using techniques refined over centuries, but comfort was never the priority. Defense was. According to architectural historians, a typical stone castle from the High Middle Ages consisted of several key features: curtain walls, thick outer walls, often 8 to 15 feet thick, towers for surveillance and defense, a keep or dungeon, a central fortified tower, a great hall for communal dining and sleeping, and a chapel, because God was always watching, even if cleanliness wasn't. The walls are made of stone, a rubble core construction, 2 outer layers of cut stone with a core of rubble and mortar in between. They're cold, always cold. Stone is an excellent insulator during summer, keeping the interior cool, but during winter, it turns the entire castle into a damp, drafty refrigerator. Windows are narrow slits called arrow loops or murder holes, designed for archers to shoot out of while minimizing incoming fire. They let in almost no light and even less warmth. Glass windows exist, but only in the Lord's private chambers and maybe the chapel. Everywhere else, wooden shutters that you can close to keep out wind and rain, which also eliminates all natural light, or leave open and freeze. Heating is a joke. The Great Hall has a central hearth of fire pit in the middle of the room with smoke rising to a hole in the ceiling called a louver. Except smoke doesn't obediently rise straight up. It fills the room, stings your eyes, coats your lungs, and leaves a layer of soot on everything. Smaller rooms might have fireplaces built into the walls, but these are luxuries reserved for the nobility. Everyone else huddles near whatever heat source is available and prays for spring. The floors are usually stone, sometimes covered with rushes, dried reeds, or straw, mixed with herbs to help control the smell, except the rushes aren't changed often. According to contemporary accounts, including those of Dutch scholar Erasmus visiting England in the 16th century, the rushes on castle floors could be months or even years old, harboring food scraps, urine, vomit, and breeding grounds for fleas, lice, and various other pests. You're walking on a biological hazard. Ceilings are high in the Great Hall, impressive for acoustics, terrible for heating. In residential chambers, they're low and oppressive, sometimes with exposed wooden beams that seem designed to give you a concussion when you forget to duck. And then there's the keep, a central tower where the Lord lives and where the castle makes its last stand during a siege. It's the most fortified part of the structure, which also means it's the most cramped, poorly ventilated, and generally unpleasant. Staircases spiral upward in tight corkscrews, deliberately designed to disadvantage attackers, who would be climbing up while defenders fought downward with more room to swing their weapons. You'll be climbing these stairs constantly, hauling firewood, carrying water, delivering messages, and your calves will be screaming by day 2. If you make it that long, every surface is damp. Stone walls sweat with condensation. Mold grows in corners. The smell of mildew is constant. This is your new home. It's cold, dark, smoky, and damp. And it's not going to get better. We need to address this immediately, because it's somehow worse than you're imagining. In a medieval castle, the bathroom is called a garderobe, which sounds charming until you learn what it actually is. It's a small chamber, usually built into the thickness of the castle wall, with a wooden or stone seat featuring a hole. That hole drops straight down the exterior wall, sending your waste either into the moat, onto the ground below, or into a cesspit at the base of the wall. There's no plumbing, no flush, no running water, just gravity and hope. According to archaeological studies of medieval castles, garderobes were often positioned in towers or along outer walls, with shafts that carried waste down and away from the main structure. The Tower of London, for instance, has several surviving garderobes, some of which emptied directly into the Thames. Luxurious. Privacy is minimal. Most garderobes have a door, but it's a thin wooden panel, and the chambers themselves are so small you can barely turn around. Some castles have communal toilet seats. Yes, multiple holes side by side, so you can relieve yourself while making awkward small talk with your neighbor. Medieval teamwork. The smell is apocalyptic. Despite attempts to ventilate these spaces, often by positioning them on exterior walls to catch the breeze, they reek constantly. The waste accumulates below, fermenting in the heat, freezing in winter, and generally creating a biohazard zone that no modern health inspector would allow within 100 miles of human habitation. And here's a fun fact. During sieges, enemies sometimes climbed up the waste chutes to infiltrate castles. Yes, attackers would scale walls covered in human feces to sneak inside. The most famous example is the assassination of King Edward II, who was allegedly murdered while sitting on a garderobe at Berkeley Castle in 1327. The attackers reportedly inserted a red-hot poker through the toilet hole. Medieval warfare was not subtle. Toilet paper doesn't exist. You're using straw, moss, leaves, scraps of old cloth, or sometimes just your hand followed by a rinse in a communal water basin. Which brings us to the next nightmare. Hand hygiene is essentially non-existent. You might rinse your hands before meals if you're eating with the nobility, who insist on a basin and towel before dining, but otherwise you're just wiping them on your tunic and moving on with your day. Chamber pots are used in private chambers, especially at night when wandering through dark corridors to a garderobe sounds like a recipe for falling down stairs or getting stabbed by a paranoid guard. These pots are emptied by servants, possibly you, who carry them down to the garderobe or outside to be dumped. The contents slosh. The smell follows you. And if you spill, that's your problem to clean up with whatever rags are available. The castle latrine is one of the most democratizing features of medieval life. Everyone's waste is equally disgusting, and everyone suffers the same indignities. Except the Lord probably has a private garderobe closer to his chamber, while you're using the communal one 3 floors down. Better hold it. You survived the night somehow. Maybe you slept on the floor of the great hall, wrapped in a thin blanket that smells like the previous occupant's fever dreams. Maybe you found a corner in the stables, warmed by the breath of horses and the gentle scent of manure. Either way, you're awake now, stiff, cold, and starving. Let's talk about food. Specifically, the food you'll actually get, not the feast scenes from movies where roasted boars spin on spits, while everyone laughs and drinks from goblets. Breakfast, as a concept, barely exists in medieval castle life. The nobility might break their fast with ale, bread, and maybe some cheese. You, on the other hand, are getting whatever's left over from yesterday's pottage, a perpetual stew that lives in a cauldron in the kitchen and never fully dies. According to food historians, pottage was the staple of medieval peasant and lower-class diets, a thick stew made from whatever grains, legumes, vegetables, and scraps were available. It was cheap, filling, and deeply monotonous. Today's pottage contains barley, some questionable root vegetables, turnips, probably a few beans that may have seen better days, and the vague memory of a chicken that died in the courtyard last week. It's been simmering for 3 days, which means the flavors have had time to marry, and then divorce and remarry, and possibly file a restraining order. The bread you're served is dark, dense, and made from rye or barley flour wheat is for the lord and his favored knights. According to records from medieval English estates, servants and laborers received loaves weighing about 1 to 2 pounds, which sounds generous until you realize it's supposed to last you the entire day, and it's mostly air, grit, and the occasional surprise insect. You're also drinking small beer or ale, not because medieval people were all functional alcoholics, but because the water is genuinely dangerous. Archaeological analysis of medieval water sources reveals contamination from human and animal waste, making waterborne diseases a constant threat. Brewing ale, even weak ale with minimal alcohol content, involved boiling water, which killed most pathogens, so you drink it. At 6 a.m., your ancestors would be proud. Your liver is filing a formal complaint. Meat? Forget it. According to dietary records from medieval households, meat consumption was strictly rationed. The nobility ate meat regularly: beef, pork, venison, fowl, while servants and laborers might see it once a week if they were lucky, usually on Sundays or feast days. Fresh fish was available if the castle had access to ponds, rivers, or the sea, but for most inland castles, that meant salted fish, which had been preserved for months and tasted like the ocean had a grudge against your tongue. Fruits and vegetables depend entirely on the season. Summer brings peas, onions, leeks, and cabbages. Winter brings fewer peas, older onions, and the realization that vitamin C deficiency is your new personality trait. Scurvy was a genuine threat for castle inhabitants during long winters or extended sieges. Symptoms include bleeding gums, tooth loss, joint pain, and general misery. Basically, medieval life with extra steps. Spices are for the rich. A pinch of pepper costs more than your monthly wages, assuming you're being paid at all. Salt is locked in the castle stores and rationed carefully. Your food is seasoned with disappointment and the faint hope that tomorrow's pottage might contain something other than turnips. Dining in the great hall is an event for the nobility. The lord sits at the high table on a raised platform, surrounded by his family, favored knights, and important guests. Below them, at trestle tables, sit the household officials and higher-ranking servants. And below them, squatting on the floor or standing near the walls, are you and your fellow bottom feeders, eating from wooden bowls with wooden spoons and trying not to make eye contact with anyone important. The hall is loud. Dogs wander between tables, fighting over scraps. Bones are thrown on the floor for the dogs or the rush-covered ground to absorb. Conversations echo off stone walls. The fire in the central hearth belches smoke. And through it all, you eat your pottage, choke down your bread, and wonder how you're going to survive lunch. Breakfast is over. The beer has settled uneasily in your stomach. Now it's time to work, and your medieval job description can be summarized in 3 words. Do everything miserable. Let's start with the basics. If you're a male servant or laborer in the castle, your job might include mucking stables. Medieval castles housed dozens of war horses for knights, palfreys for nobility, pack horses for transport. According to military historians, a modest castle garrison might maintain 20 to 30 horses in peacetime, and more during campaigns. These horses eat constantly and produce waste at an impressive rate. Your job is to shovel manure, replace straw bedding, and haul the soiled material to the midden, the castle's communal garbage heap, which is exactly as pleasant as it sounds. You do this every day, in all weather, while breathing air thick with ammonia and horse funk. Hauling water. Castles need water for cooking, brewing, washing, rarely, and putting out fires. Most castles have a well in the courtyard, sometimes a cistern inside the keep. You're carrying wooden buckets up spiral staircases, across courtyards, and into kitchens. Each bucket weighs 15 to 20 pounds when full. You'll make dozens of trips per day. Your shoulders will develop their own angry consciousness. Chopping and hauling firewood. The castle's fireplaces, hearths, and ovens consume massive amounts of wood. According to studies of medieval castle logistics, a large household could burn through several cords of wood per week during winter. You're out in the forest with an axe, if they trust you with one, or hauling split logs from the woodpile into various buildings. Splinters, blisters, and back pain are your new friends. Fetching supplies from the village. Castles aren't self-sufficient. They rely on surrounding villages for food, materials, and labor. You're sent out to collect grain from peasants, who are thrilled to see you, pick up supplies from the mill, or deliver messages. These trips can be miles each way, on foot, in mud or snow, while carrying heavy loads. Cleaning. The Great Hall needs its rushes changed, eventually. Chambers need their chamber pots emptied. Fireplaces need ashes cleared. Courtyard needs sweeping. Walls need scrubbing when mold gets particularly aggressive. You're doing all of this with basic tools brooms made from twigs, rags, water heated over fires you had to build yourself, and no one is thanking you. If you're a female servant, your jobs are somehow even more exhausting. Laundry. Washing clothes in the Middle Ages is an all-day affair. According to historical accounts, laundresses would heat water in large cauldrons, scrub fabric on washboards or rocks, use lye or urine as cleaning agents. Yes, urine, the ammonia, helps break down stains. And then rinse, wring, and hang everything to dry. A single load could take 6 hours. You're doing this for the entire household, which means dozens of tunics, shifts, linens, and the Lord's elaborate garments that absolutely cannot be damaged. Cooking. The castle kitchen is a hellscape of heat, smoke, and pressure. You're helping prepare meals for hundreds of people using open hearths and primitive ovens. You're plucking chickens, gutting fish, kneading dough, stirring cauldrons of pottage, and trying not to burn yourself or the food while the cook screams at you in a language you barely understand. Childcare. If the noble family has children, someone needs to watch them. That someone might be you. Medieval children were not docile. They were loud, curious, and frequently in danger from open fires, steep staircases, weapons lying around, or just the general hazards of castle life. You're chasing them through corridors, pulling them away from guards, and explaining why they can't play with the swords. Again, spinning and weaving. Textile production is constant. Someone needs to spin wool into thread, weave thread into fabric, and sew fabric into garments. This work is tedious, time-consuming, and hard on your hands. According to archaeological evidence, many medieval women showed signs of repetitive strain injuries from years of spinning and weaving. No matter your gender, your work schedule is brutal. You start at dawn and finish at dusk, with minimal breaks. There are no weekends. Sundays might offer a reprieve for religious services, but even then, essential work continues. Animals still need feeding, fires still need tending, and lords still need serving. You're not paid well. According to records from 14th century English estates, castle servants might receive a combination of room, board, and a small monetary wage, perhaps a few pence per day for skilled workers, less for unskilled laborers. That money buys almost nothing. You can't leave, because where would you go? You have no savings, no prospects, and the world outside the castle is even more dangerous. Your coworkers are exhausted, resentful, and occasionally violent. Fights break out over petty slights. Someone steals your bread. Another servant blames you for their mistake, and you take the beating from the overseer. There's no HR department. There's no appeal process. You endure. You keep working, or you're thrown out of the castle to starve. This is your life now, and you still have 18 hours left in your first day. Let's talk about the weather, because in a medieval castle, temperature is less about seasons and more about a constant state of thermal warfare against your body. First, winter. Imagine the worst cold you've ever experienced. Then remove central heating, insulation, and anything resembling modern comfort. According to climate historians studying the medieval warm period and subsequent cooling, European winters during the 13th and 14th centuries could be brutal, with temperatures regularly dropping below freezing for months. The castle's stone walls, so effective at keeping enemies out, are equally effective at keeping warmth out and cold in. Stone is thermally dense, which means it absorbs heat slowly and radiates cold constantly. Even with fires burning, the ambient temperature in most castle spaces hovers just above mildly hypothermic. Your clothing is woolen good for insulation when dry, absolutely miserable when wet. And it's often wet because you're either sweating from labor, caught in rain while working outside, or standing too close to the steaming cauldrons in the kitchen. Wet wool doesn't dry quickly in a damp castle, so you're basically wearing a cold, heavy, scratchy blanket that hates you. Fires provide heat, but only if you're standing within 5 feet of them. The Great Hall's central hearth is a massive fire pit that consumes logs the size of small trees, yet somehow only heats a radius of about 10 feet. Everyone crowds around it, jockeying for position, trying to warm frozen hands and feet while smoke fills their lungs. Move 6 feet away, and you're back in the cold zone. Smaller chambers have fireplaces built into walls, a technological improvement that directs smoke up chimneys and concentrates heat more effectively. But these are luxuries for the nobility. You're sleeping in communal spaces with no dedicated heating. At night, you huddle with other servants, sharing body heat under thin blankets, listening to people cough, snore, and shiver. Your extremities are always cold. Your fingers go numb while working. Your toes lose feeling inside your inadequate shoes. Chilblains, painful inflammation of small blood vessels in response to cold, are common. According to medieval medical texts, physicians recommended various treatments for cold-related ailments, including warming the affected areas gradually, the only advice that actually worked, and applying bizarre poultices of herbs and animal fat, less effective. Now let's talk about summer, which sounds better until you remember that stone castles are poorly ventilated and filled with hundreds of people generating body heat. Summer in a castle means sweat constant, unrelenting sweat. You're working in kitchens heated by massive ovens and open fires. You're hauling water under the midday sun. You're sleeping in crowded spaces where the air is thick and stagnant. There's no air conditioning. There's no fans. There's barely any cross breeze because the narrow windows were designed for defense, not comfort. Your wool clothing, perfect for winter, becomes a portable sauna in summer. You can't remove layers because modesty and social norms prohibit it, so you suffer in your own moisture, developing rashes where fabric chafes against sweaty skin. The smell intensifies. Human sweat, animal waste, rotting rushes, stagnant moat water, Everything ripens in the heat. Flies multiply exponentially, buzzing around food, waste, and people with democratic enthusiasm. According to archaeological evidence, medieval castles were breeding grounds for various pests during warmer months, including fleas, lice, and mosquitoes. You're also dealing with sun exposure when working outside. No sunscreen. No protective clothing beyond a basic head covering. Sunburn is common, especially for fair-skinned Northern Europeans. And while medieval people understood the danger of prolonged sun exposure, heat stroke was well documented. There was little you could do about it when your job required outdoor labor for 12 hours. So whether it's winter or summer, you're uncomfortable. The castle's architecture amplifies temperature extremes rather than moderating them. The only people who experience anything close to comfort are the nobility, who have private chambers with fireplaces, better clothing, and the luxury of not working themselves into physical exhaustion. You have neither privacy, comfort, nor control over your environment. The cold seeps into your bones. The heat drains your energy. And there's still so much day left to endure. Before we get to dinner, we need to talk about the fact that you are not alone in your body. You have roommates, hundreds of them, and they're eating you alive. Parasites in medieval times weren't an occasional problem. They were a universal condition. Everyone, from the king to the lowliest scullery maid, hosted fleas, lice, and bedbugs. Archaeological analysis of medieval clothing, bedding, and even the preserved bodies from peat bogs reveals universal infestation. Let's start with lice. You have 3 varieties living on you. Head lice, Pediculus humanus capitis. These tiny insects live in your hair, lay eggs, nits, that cement to hair shafts, and feed on your scalp blood several times a day. They cause intense itching. You scratch constantly, sometimes until your scalp bleeds, and those wounds can become infected. Medieval, people used fine-toothed combs to remove them. Archaeological digs have found these lice cones at virtually every medieval site. Body lice, Pediculus humanus corporis. These live in the seams of your clothing, coming out to feed on your skin. They're more than annoying. They're vectors for typhus, trench fever, and relapsing fever. During crowded conditions like sieges or winter, when people huddle together, body lice spread epidemic typhus that can kill thousands. Pubic lice, Thyrus pubis, also called crabs. These infest pubic and other coarse body hair. They're passed through close contact and are ubiquitous in medieval populations, living in close quarters with minimal hygiene. Then there are the fleas. The most common is Pulex irritans, the human flea, but you're also hosting rat fleas, Xenopsilochiepis, from the rodents that live in every castle. These fleas are more than itchy bites. They're the primary vector for bubonic plague. Each flea bite is a potential death lottery. Bedbugs, Cymex lectularius, live in the cracks of wooden bed frames, in straw mattresses, in the rushes on the floor. They emerge at night to feed, leaving itchy welts across your body. Medieval people knew about them. They tried fumigation with sulfur, boiling bedding, and even setting beds in moats overnight, but nothing truly eliminated them. And it's not just insects. According to parasitological studies of medieval latrines and coprolites, fossilized feces, intestinal parasites were endemic. Roundworms, Ascaris lumbricoides. These can grow up to 14 inches long inside your intestines. They cause malnutrition by competing for nutrients, and heavy infections can cause intestinal blockages. Whipworms, Schurchuris trichiura. These cause bloody diarrhea and anemia. Heavy infections stunt growth in children. Tapeworms, acquired from eating undercooked meat. These can grow to extraordinary lengths inside your digestive system, sometimes causing few symptoms, but occasionally causing serious complications. Liver flukes and other parasites. From contaminated water and poorly cooked food, these affect various organs and cause chronic illness. You acquire these parasites through contaminated food and water, poor hand hygiene, and the universal practice of sharing eating vessels and living in close quarters with infected people. Personal hygiene in medieval castles is minimal and mostly ineffective. Bathing. As mentioned, full immersion bathing is rare and considered medically risky. The nobility might bathe a few times a year in wooden tubs, but the water is shared among multiple bathers, family members bathing in sequence in the same water. And it's not really changing with soap. Soap exists, but is expensive and harsh, made from animal fats and lye. Washing. Most washing is dry brushing clothes to remove visible dirt, combing hair to remove lice, wiping face and hands with damp cloths. According to medieval medical texts, physicians recommended washing hands before meals, but this usually meant a quick rinse in a shared basin, not thorough washing with soap. Laundry. Clothes are washed infrequently, perhaps monthly or seasonally for ordinary garments. The process is labor-intensive. Heating water, soaking clothes in lye or urine, beating them on stones or washboards, rinsing, and hanging to dry. Because it's so much work, people simply don't do it often. You wear the same tunic for weeks or months between washings. Teeth. We covered this earlier, but it bears repeating. Oral hygiene is terrible. No toothbrushes, no toothpaste. Some people chew on willow or hazel twigs to clean teeth, or rinse with wine, water, or vinegar. But plaque builds up, gums become infected, and teeth rot. By your mid-20s, you likely have multiple cavities, abscesses, and missing teeth. The pain is constant, and there's no effective treatment. Your body is a battlefield. You're fighting a losing war against microscopic invaders that you can't see, understand, or defeat. You itch everywhere: scalp, groin, armpits, the entire surface of your skin. Scratching provides momentary relief, but worsens the problem, breaking skin and allowing infections. At night, lying on your pallet in the great hall, you feel them moving, the fleas hopping across your skin, the lice crawling through your hair, the bedbugs emerging from cracks to feed. It's not paranoia. They're actually there. Everyone around you is scratching too. This is normal. This is life. And the worst part? You can't escape them. Washing doesn't help enough. Changing clothes just means moving the parasites from old fabric to new. They're in the rushes, in the straw bedding, in the wooden furniture, in everyone's hair and clothes. They reproduce faster than you can eliminate them. Medieval people tried remedies: mercury compounds, toxic; sulfur fumigation, somewhat effective but harsh; various herbal preparations, mostly ineffective. Nothing worked well enough to eliminate infestations. So you live with them. You accept that your body is home to an ecosystem of parasites. You scratch, you suffer, and you hope you don't develop one of the diseases they carry. Because if you do, there's no effective treatment, and you might join the countless others who died from typhus, plague, or the complications of chronic parasitic infections. This is your body now. You're not really alone in it anymore, and you never will be again. You're thirsty. You've been working for hours, sweating through your wool tunic, and your throat feels like sandpaper wrapped in regret. Surely there's water somewhere, right? Fresh, clean water to quench your thirst and wash the grime from your hands? Well, yes and no. Mostly no. Medieval castles had water sources, but clean is a generous interpretation. Most castles were built with access to water in mind, either a well inside the walls, a cistern collecting rainwater, or proximity to a river or stream. According to archaeological surveys of medieval fortifications, wells were often sunk deep into bedrock, sometimes 100 feet or more, to reach groundwater. The well in the courtyard of Chateau Galliard in France, for example, descends over 150 feet through solid rock. Sounds safe, right? Groundwater, protected from surface contamination. Except wells were often located near stables, kitchens, and cesspits. Medieval engineers understood the need for water, but they didn't understand bacterial contamination. A well sunk 50 feet from a latrine might seem adequately separated, but groundwater doesn't respect property lines. Seepage happens. contamination spreads. And then there's rainwater collection. Many castles had cisterns, large stone tanks built into courtyards or beneath buildings to catch and store rainwater. This was particularly important for castles built on hilltops or rocky outcrops where wells weren't feasible. The problem? These cisterns were open to the air, which meant they collected not just rain, but also bird droppings, dead insects, wind-blown debris, and whatever else fell from the sky or crawled in looking for a drink. According to medieval household accounts, castle staff were supposed to clean cisterns periodically, but periodically is doing a lot of work in that sentence. Archaeological evidence from cistern excavations reveals layers of sediment, organic matter, and the occasional skeleton of small animals that fell in and couldn't get out. You're drinking water that has been steeping with a dead rat for 3 months. Refreshing. Rivers and streams offer another option, assuming the castle has access. But medieval rivers were communal sewers. Upstream villages dumped their waste into the same water you're drawing from downstream. Tanneries, which processed animal hides using urine and feces to cure leather, discharged their runoff into rivers. Butchers threw animal entrails into the water. And every castle, village, and town along the waterway contributed its share of human waste. This is why everyone drinks ale or small beer. The brewing process boils water, killing most pathogens. It's not perfect brewing didn't eliminate all bacterial contamination, especially if the beer was stored in dirty barrels or served in unwashed cups, but it was safer than drinking straight from questionable sources. But you can't bathe in beer, and you can't wash clothes in it, so the dirty water cycle continues. You wash your face in water drawn from a cistern that may contain biological surprises. You rinse vegetables in water from the well. You wipe down tables with rags dampened in buckets filled from the stream. And here's where it gets worse. Medieval people believed that bathing, particularly full-body immersion, in hot water was dangerous. Medical texts from the period warned that bathing opened the pores, allowing disease to enter the body. According to historian Catherine Harvey's research on medieval hygiene, this belief was rooted in humoral theory, which dominated medical thought. Physicians believed that excessive bathing disrupted the balance of bodily humors, potentially causing illness. So bathing was infrequent. The nobility might bathe a few times a year, usually as part of religious rituals or special occasions. Servants and laborers bathed even less, perhaps once or twice annually, if that. The rest of the time, you're maintaining personal hygiene through dry cleaning, brushing clothes to remove lice, changing undergarments if you have spares, and spot cleaning with rags. Your skin is an ecosystem. Fleas, lice, and bedbugs live on you rent-free. Everyone has them. The lord, the knight, the priest, the cook, you parasites are the great equalizer of medieval life. According to archaeological analysis of medieval clothing and bedding, infestations were universal. Combs specifically designed for removing lice have been found at castle sites across Europe. You itch constantly, scratching leaves marks. Some people develop infections from scratching too aggressively. Impetigo, abscesses, and skin ulcers are common. Without antibiotics, even minor skin infections can become serious. You know someone who lost a finger to an infected scratch. Another person died from what started as a small wound that festered and spread. But you need water for more than drinking and minimal hygiene. The castle needs it too, for fighting fires, which were a constant threat in structures built from wood, thatch, and filled with open flames. Fire buckets are stationed around the castle, filled with water that sits stagnant until an emergency. When a fire breaks out, and fires break out regularly, everyone grabs buckets and forms lines, passing water hand to hand, while smoke fills corridors and people scream. According to historical records, castle fires were often catastrophic. Windsor Castle suffered major fires in 1296 and again in 1853. Wooden Tower of London burned in 1512. These weren't small events. Entire sections of castles could be destroyed, and people trapped in stone buildings with limited exits often died. So you're dehydrated, dirty, and itchy. The water situation is a nightmare. And somehow, this still isn't the worst part of your day. Before we get to dinner, we need to address the elephant in the room, or rather, the chapel in the castle. Religion isn't just part of medieval life. It is medieval life. God is watching, the church is controlling, and your immortal soul is always at stake. The castle has a chapel, probably located in a keep or a prominent tower. It's one of the few spaces that's actually decorated painted walls depicting biblical scenes, stained glass windows, if the Lord is wealthy, and an altar covered in fine cloths. The chapel is where the Lord hears Mass, where marriages are solemnized, where prayers are offered for victory in battle, and where you're required to appear regularly, whether you want to or not. The medieval day is structured around canonical Hours 8 prayer times that mark the rhythm of life. Matins, midnight or 2 a.m. Monks and priests rise to pray. You, thankfully, are still sleeping, though the chapel bells wake everyone briefly. Lauds dawn around 5 to 6 a.m. Morning prayers. The Lord and his household might attend. You're probably already working, but you're expected to pause and cross yourself when the bells ring. Prime 6-7 a.m., the first of the little hours. More prayers, but most people are working by now. Terce, 9 a.m., mid-morning prayers. If it's Sunday or a feast day, you stop working to attend Mass. Sext, noon, midday prayers. A brief pause in work. None, 3 p.m., afternoon prayers. The day is grinding on, and you're exhausted, but you still cross yourself when the bells ring. Vespers, sunset, around 6 p.m., evening prayers. This is a major service, and you're expected to attend, or at least observe the ritual. Compline, 9 p.m., night prayers before bed. The last official prayer of the day, though private devotions continue. Church bells don't just mark prayer times, they structure reality. They tell you when to wake, when to work, when to eat, when to pray, when to sleep. You live by the rhythm whether you're religious or not. Sunday is the Sabbath, and work is prohibited well, mostly. Essential tasks continue. Animals still need feeding, fires still need tending, but you're expected to attend Mass. The service is in Latin, which you don't understand unless you've had education. You haven't. The priest drones through liturgy. You stand. There are no pews for commoners. Those are for nobility. And you try not to fall asleep, despite being exhausted from the week's labor. According to canon law, missing Mass is a mortal sin that could damn your soul to hell. The parish priest or castle chaplain keeps records of who attends. If you're absent without legitimate excuse, serious illness, childbirth, essential work approved by authority, you face public penance, standing outside the church door, begging forgiveness, fasting, or other humiliations. Beyond Sunday, the medieval calendar is packed with holy days, feast days for saints, religious festivals, commemoration of biblical events. According to historians calculating medieval holy days, there might be 40 to 50 obligatory feast days per year when work is prohibited and church attendance is required. These aren't holidays in the modern sense. They're holy days requiring religious observance. Some major feasts include Christmas, December 25th, celebrating Christ's birth, multiple masses, feasting for those who can afford it, and temporary relaxation of social hierarchies. Servants might be invited to dine with nobles, though still in inferior positions. Easter, the most important Christian feast, celebrating resurrection, preceded by Lent 40 days of fasting, prayer, and penance. During Lent, meat is prohibited. Eggs and dairy might also be forbidden, depending on how strictly the fast is observed. For common people already eating minimal meat, Lent means even more restricted diets. Pentecost, 50 days after Easter, celebrating the Holy Spirit. Another major feast with required church attendance, Assumption, August 15th. Mary's Ascension to Heaven. A major feast requiring observance. All Saints, November 1st, and All Souls, November 2nd. Honoring saints and praying for the dead. People visit graves, make offerings, pray for souls in purgatory. There are dozens more feasts for local patron saints, apostles, martyrs, biblical events. Each one interrupts the work schedule and requires religious participation. Fast days are even more numerous. Beyond Lent, the Church mandates fasting on. Every Friday, commemorating Christ's crucifixion, no meat ember days, 4 sets of 3-day fasts throughout the year, minimal food vigils before major feasts, fasting in preparation. According to calculations by medieval historians, devout Christians might fast or abstain from meat for 150 to 200 days per year. That's half the year or more, with dietary restrictions on top of already limited food availability. Fasting doesn't mean eating nothing. It means eating less, avoiding meat, and focusing on bread, vegetables, and sometimes fish. But for people already living on subsistence diets, fasting days mean genuine hunger. The Church's control extends beyond prayer schedules and diets. Tithes. You owe 10% of your produce to the Church. If you grow grain, you give 1/10 of your harvest. If you raise animals, you give 1/10 of your livestock. This is mandatory, enforced by both religious authority and secular power. Refusing to pay tithes can result in excommunication, being banned from church sacraments and community, or legal punishment. Sacraments. The Church controls access to 7 sacraments essential for salvation: baptism, confirmation, Eucharist, penance, anointing of the sick, marriage, and holy orders. You need the Church for all major life events. Want to marry? The Church must approve and perform the ceremony. Having a baby? The Church baptizes it, and if the baby dies unbaptized, its soul goes to limbo, not heaven. Dying? You need last rites from a priest. Confession. You're required to confess your sins to a priest at least annually, usually during Lent. This means revealing private thoughts, actions, and moral failings to a religious authority figure who could use that information against you or share it with secular authorities. Penance. After confession, the priest assigns penance prayers, fasting, pilgrimages, or other acts to demonstrate repentance. Refusing penance means your sins aren't forgiven, and you're endangering your immortal soul. Excommunication, the ultimate religious punishment, excluding you from church sacraments and Christian community. You can't receive communion, can't be buried in consecrated ground, and are socially ostracized. For medieval people who believe in hell and damnation, excommunication is terrifying. The Church also controls intellectual life. Literacy is rare and largely limited to clergy and educated nobility. The Bible exists only in Latin. Vernacular translations are forbidden and considered heretical. You cannot read Scripture yourself. You depend entirely on priests to interpret God's Word. Church teachings dominate understanding of the world. The earth is the center of the universe. Illness is caused by sin or demonic influence. Natural disasters are divine punishment. Social hierarchy is God-ordained. Kings rule by divine right. Nobles have authority because God wills it. You're a servant because that's your God-given place. Suffering in this life is preparation for the next. Questioning church doctrine is heresy, punishable by excommunication, imprisonment, torture, or execution. The Inquisition, established to root out heresy, operates in some regions. Accused heretics are interrogated, often tortured, and if found guilty, burned at stake. Even expressing doubt about transubstantiation, the belief that communion bread and wine literally become Christ's body and blood, can be deadly. Superstition blends with religion. Relics, bones, or possessions of saints have miracle-working power. Crossing yourself wards off evil. Prayers to specific saints help with specific problems. Saint Christopher for travelers, Saint Blaise for throat ailments, Saint Anthony for lost items. Demons cause illness and misfortune. Witches exist and make pacts with Satan. The devil is real, active, and constantly trying to claim souls. According to medieval belief, you're in spiritual warfare. Angels and demons fight for your soul. Every sin brings you closer to damnation. Every good work earns merit toward salvation. The stakes are literally eternal infinite bliss in heaven or infinite torment in hell. And here's the crushing part. You can never be sure you're saved. Even if you live virtuously, attend Mass, confess sins, and perform penance, you might still be damned. Medieval theology is heavy on guilt, fear, and uncertainty. You're taught from childhood that you're fundamentally sinful, that salvation is difficult, and that most people go to hell. Purgatory offers some hope, a place between heaven and hell where souls are, purified through suffering, before eventually entering heaven. But purgatory's torments are described as nearly as terrible as hell's, and you might spend thousands of years there. The living can shorten your purgatory through prayers, masses, and good works done in your name, which is why wealthy people leave money in their wills for masses to be said for their souls. For you, a poor servant with no money for posthumous masses, your hope is that God's mercy outweighs your sins. But the Church doesn't emphasize mercy. It emphasizes judgment, punishment, and the very real possibility of damnation. So you pray. You cross yourself dozens of times a day. You mutter prayers while working. You beg saints for intercession. You fear hell more than you fear anything earthly, more than hunger, cold, disease, or violence, because those are temporary, while damnation is eternal. Religion isn't comfort. It's obligation, fear, control, and the constant reminder that your soul hangs in the balance. Every action, thought, and word is judged by an omniscient God who sees your sins even when humans don't. The castle chapel's bells ring for vespers. You stop working, cross yourself, mouth a prayer, and return to your labor. God is watching. The Church is controlling, and your salvation is never, ever certain. Evening approaches. The light filtering through arrow slits turns golden, then dim. Church bells ring for vespers. Your body aches from 12 hours of labor. And now it's time for dinner, which sounds like relief until you remember where you rank in the castle hierarchy. Dinner in the Great Hall is the main social event of the day, but it's also a carefully choreographed performance of status and power. The hall itself is impressive, a massive space with high ceilings supported by wooden beams, walls decorated with tapestries, if the lord is wealthy, and trestle tables arranged in strict order of importance. At the far end, elevated on a dais, sits the high table where the lord dines with his family, honored guests, and chief officers. They have actual chairs with backs, a luxury in the medieval world, where most seating is benches or stools. They eat from pewter or even silver plates. They have napkins. They have servants bringing courses in sequence. Below them, running perpendicular to the high table, are long trestle tables for knights, household officials, and senior servants. These tables are covered with linen cloths. People sit on benches, shoulder to shoulder, eating from wooden trenchers thick slices of stale bread that serve as edible plates. And then there's you, standing near the walls or squatting on the floor with other low-ranking servants, eating from a wooden bowl, watching everyone else enjoy the meal you helped prepare. Let's talk about what's being served. Because the medieval feast of popular imagination roasted swans, peacocks in full plumage, massive pies, endless wine is reserved for special occasions and the very wealthy. Regular dinners are more modest, though still stratified by rank. The high table gets the best of everything. According to medieval household accounts, noble diners might enjoy multiple courses, pottage or soup to start, followed by roasted meats, beef, pork, venison, fowl, fish on fast days, which were numerous Fridays, plus Lent, plus various saints' feast days, meant nearly half the year prohibited meat. vegetables prepared with butter or lard, white bread made from wheat flour, and sweetmeats or fruit for dessert. The lower tables get simpler fare, coarser bread, less meat or cheaper cuts, more vegetables and grains, and watered-down ale. Food quality literally descends from the high table down. You get scraps, literally. After the Lord and his guests have eaten, after the household officers have been served, after the knights and soldiers have taken their share, whatever remains is distributed among the lowest servants. Sometimes it's a decent portion of pottage and bread. Sometimes it's bones with meat still clinging to them. Sometimes it's nothing, and you go to sleep hungry. The dining experience itself is loud, crowded, and somewhat chaotic. Dogs roam the hall, waiting for scraps to be thrown. And scraps are thrown constantly. Bones, gristle, inedible bits of food all hit the rush-covered floor, where dogs fight over them while the hall echoes with conversation, laughter, and the occasional argument. Table manners exist, but they're different from modern etiquette. According to medieval courtesy books, like the 15th century Book of Courtesy, diners were instructed not to speak with their mouths full, pick their teeth with their knives, blow their noses on the tablecloth, scratch themselves at the table, or return gnawed bones to the communal serving platter. The fact that these things needed to be explicitly prohibited tells you everything about what was actually happening. Most people eat with their hands. Forks are rare and considered somewhat effeminate, Italian oddity that hasn't caught on in Northern Europe. You have a knife, probably your own personal blade that you carry everywhere, and you use it to spear meat, cut portions, and generally navigate the meal. Spoons exist for pottage and liquids. Food is shared communally. A large roasted bird or joint of meat is placed on the table, and people cut portions directly from it. Bread trenchers absorb juices and gravy, becoming soggy by meal's end, and then they're eaten, tossed to dogs, or collected for the poor waiting outside the castle gates. Drinking vessels are also communal. A cup or goblet might be shared among several diners who pass it down the table. This is why people wipe the rim with a cloth before drinking, not from germ consciousness. The germ theory of disease is centuries away, but from basic courtesy. The Lord's table has entertainment. Minstrels play music. Sometimes there's a jester or fool who tells jokes, performs tricks, and generally provides distraction. Important announcements are made. Disputes are settled. Business is conducted between courses. Your entertainment is watching all of this from the periphery, while your stomach growls and your legs ache from standing all day. And here's the thing about medieval dinner. It's not just a meal. It's a display of power. The Lord sits above, distributing food and favor like a god among mortals. Everything about the meal, who sits where, who gets served first, what quality of food appears on which table, reinforces the hierarchy. You are being reminded, with every bite, exactly where you belong. After dinner, the hall transforms. Trestle tables are dismantled and stored against walls. Space is cleared. Some people retire to private chambers, the nobility, the privileged few. Everyone else remains in the great hall, which becomes a communal sleeping area. Pallets are unrolled. Blankets are distributed. You find a spot on the floor, away from the central hearth, if you value sleep over warmth. The area near the fire is crowded and noisy, and try to rest. The hall never fully quiets. People snore. Someone coughs continuously, a wet, rattling cough that suggests consumption or lung disease. A couple argues in whispered hisses. Dogs wander, sniffing for forgotten scraps. Guards change shifts with clanking armor and heavy boots. Above you, smoke from the dying fire drifts toward the ceiling louver. The rushes beneath you rustle with insects. The stone walls radiate cold. You close your eyes and try to pretend you're somewhere else. Anywhere else. You've made it to evening. You're exhausted, underfed, and uncomfortable. But if you think you're safe, just because you've kept your head down and worked hard, think again. Medieval castles operated under a system of justice that was swift, brutal, and completely arbitrary. Let's start with the basics. Law and order in a medieval castle isn't about fairness. It's about control. The lord has absolute authority within his domain. He is judge, jury, and executioner. His word is law, and his mood determines whether you live or die. According to medieval legal historians, castle lords exercised what was called high justice, the right to judge serious crimes and impose the death penalty. They also had low justice over minor offenses, allowing them to levy fines, order corporal punishment, or imprison people in the castle dungeon. Dungeons are real, and they're worse than movies suggest. Many castles have underground chambers oubliettes, from the French oublier, meaning to forget, where prisoners were literally dropped through a trapdoor in the floor and left to die. Archaeological excavations of castle dungeons reveal cramped spaces, sometimes no larger than a phone booth, with no light, minimal ventilation, and evidence of prolonged human suffering. The dungeon at Warwick Castle, for instance, features prisoners' scratch marks on the walls and graffiti carved by people who knew they would never leave. But most punishment is more immediate and public. Medieval justice relies heavily on deterrence through visible brutality. You need to see what happens to rule breakers so you don't become one yourself. Common punishments include flogging, for minor offenses laziness, disrespect, petty theft, you're tied to a post and whipped. The castle whip might be leather thongs, sometimes embedded with metal tips. According to contemporary accounts, punishments were calibrated by the number of lashes. 5 for minor infractions, 20 for more serious offenses, 50 for crimes just short of execution. People died from infected wounds after floggings. Stocks and pillory. You're locked in wooden restraints in the castle courtyard or nearby village square, exposed to the elements and public humiliation. People throw rotten food, excrement, and sometimes stones. You might be there for hours or days, depending on your crime. Dehydration, exposure, and shame are the intended consequences. Branding and mutilation. Theft often results in the loss of a hand. Lying or slander might cost you part of your tongue. These punishments are permanent markers of your transgression, ensuring everyone knows what you did. Surgical technique is non-existent. The amputation is performed with whatever blade is handy, cauterized with a hot iron to stop bleeding, and you're expected to survive or not. Execution, reserved for serious crimes, murder, rape, treason, repeated theft. Methods vary. Hanging, most common for commoners. Beheading, quicker, considered more honorable, usually for nobility. Burning at the stake, for heresy or witchcraft, or drawing and quartering, for high treason, involving being dragged behind a horse, hanged until nearly dead, disemboweled while alive, and finally dismembered. But here's the terrifying part. You don't need to commit a crime to be punished. You just need to be accused. Medieval justice doesn't require evidence in the modern sense. Accusations from higher status individuals carry automatic weight. If a knight says you stole from him, your denial means nothing. If the lord's wife claims you were disrespectful, you're guilty by accusation. Trial by ordeal is still practiced in some regions during the early medieval period, though it's declining by the 14th century. The logic: God will protect the innocent and expose the guilty. Common ordeals include trial by hot iron. You carry a burning iron bar a specified distance. Your hand is then bandaged. 3 days later, the bandage is removed. If your hand has healed cleanly, you're innocent. If it's infected, which it almost always is, you're guilty. Trial by water. You're bound and thrown into a river or pond. If you sink, you're innocent, because pure water accepts the pure, but you might drown before anyone pulls you out. If you float, you're guilty, because the water rejects you, and you're executed. Trial by combat. You and your accuser fight, with God supposedly granting victory to the righteous. If you're a peasant fighting a trained knight, God apparently has a bias toward people with better armor and weapons training. These aren't rational systems. They're theater public displays of authority designed to reinforce power structures and terrify potential dissidents. Violence isn't limited to formal punishment. Casual brutality is part of daily life. Knights and soldiers train by fighting each other, and injuries are common broken bones, concussions, cuts that need stitching. Sometimes training turns fatal when a sword thrust goes too deep or a lance shatters and impales someone. Domestic violence is completely normalized. The law explicitly permits husbands to correct wives and children through physical punishment, as long as the stick is no thicker than a thumb. Hence the phrase rule of thumb. Servants can be beaten by their masters for any reason or no reason at all. Fights break out constantly over insults, gambling disputes, accusations of cheating, romantic jealousy, or just because someone looked at someone else wrong. Castle guards might intervene if things get too disruptive, but low-level violence is considered normal. You learn to keep your head down, avoid eye contact with drunk soldiers, and never, ever challenge anyone of higher rank. According to records from medieval coroners' inquests, yes, they investigated suspicious deaths. Castles and their surrounding villages experienced surprisingly high rates of violent death. A study of 13th century English coroner rolls found that roughly 20% of deaths were from violent murders, brawls, accidents involving weapons, and executions. You're living in a society where violence is the primary enforcement mechanism for every rule, custom, and social expectation. There's no police force. There's no prison system as we understand it. There's just fear, pain, and the constant knowledge that you're one accusation away from disaster. Sleep tight. It's the middle of the night. You wake up feeling wrong. Your throat is scratchy. Your head pounds. Your body aches in ways that have nothing to do with the day's labor. You're getting sick, and in a medieval castle, that's potentially a death sentence. Let's talk about disease, because medieval castles are perfect incubators for illness. You have hundreds of people living in close quarters, poor sanitation, contaminated water, minimal hygiene, malnutrition weakening immune systems, and absolutely no understanding of germ theory or bacterial infection. Common illnesses include dysentery, caused by contaminated food or water. Dysentery, also called the bloody flux, produces severe diarrhea, fever, and abdominal pain. According to medieval medical texts and modern analysis of historical mortality records, dysentery killed millions throughout the Middle Ages. In a castle, where people share water sources and toilet facilities, one case can quickly become an outbreak. You're running to the guardrobe every hour, losing fluids faster than you can replace them, growing weaker with each day. Without modern rehydration therapy, mortality rates are high. Typhoid and typhus. Both are bacterial infections spread through contaminated water, typhoid, or lice, typhus. Symptoms include high fever, headache, rash, and eventually delirium. Typhus in particular thrives in crowded, dirty conditions exactly like a medieval castle. Outbreaks during sieges or winter, when people crowd indoors, are common and devastating. Tuberculosis, also called consumption, TB, is a chronic bacterial infection that primarily affects the lungs. It spreads through coughing and is incredibly contagious in enclosed spaces. According to paleopathological studies of medieval skeletons, TB was endemic throughout Europe. That person coughing in the Great Hall at night, they might be spreading TB to everyone sleeping nearby. The disease is slow but deadly, causing weight loss, bloody coughs, night sweats, and eventually respiratory failure over months or years. Pneumonia. In a cold, damp castle where people work outdoors in all weather and sleep in unheated rooms, respiratory infections are inevitable. What starts as a cold becomes bronchitis, then pneumonia inflammation and fluid buildup in the lungs. Without antibiotics, bacterial pneumonia has a mortality rate of around 30%. You're drowning in your own fluids, while medieval physicians stand by, helpless. Smallpox, measles, and other childhood diseases. These are called childhood diseases in the modern world because vaccination has made them relatively manageable. In the Middle Ages, they kill adults too. Smallpox, in particular, is devastating, a highly contagious viral disease that causes fever and a distinctive pustular rash. Mortality rates range from 20 to 50%. Survivors are often left with severe scarring, blindness, or other complications. Plague, the big one. Yersinia pestis, the bacterium responsible for bubonic plague, and its deadlier cousin, pneumonic plague, swept through Europe multiple times during the medieval period. The Black Death of 1347 to 1351 killed an estimated 30 to 60% of Europe's population, somewhere between 75 and 200 million people. Later outbreaks continued for centuries. If plague reaches your castle, everyone's survival depends on immediate quarantine, which rarely happens fast enough. Symptoms include fever, swollen lymph nodes, buboes, blackened tissue, hence Black Death, and usually death within a week. Now, here's the medical care you can expect. Medieval medicine is based on humoral theory, developed by ancient Greek physicians like Hippocrates and Galen, which holds that the body contains 4 humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile, and illness results from imbalance. Treatment focuses on rebalancing these humors through bloodletting. Doctors believe that many illnesses are caused by excess blood. The solution? Remove blood by opening a vein with a lancet, applying leeches, or using heated glass cups to draw blood to the skin surface. According to medical historian Catherine Harvey, bloodletting was so common that barber surgeons, yes, the same people who cut hair, performed it routinely. The problem: bloodletting weakens patients, reduces oxygen delivery to tissues, and can introduce infections. It kills more people than it helps. Purging. If bloodletting doesn't work, maybe you need to expel the bad humors through your digestive system. You're given powerful laxatives or emetics, substances that induce vomiting, to clean out your system. These treatments cause severe dehydration and electrolyte imbalances, worsening your condition. Herbal remedies. Some medieval herbal treatments are actually effective. Willow bark contains salicylic acid, the basis for aspirin. Feverfew can help with headaches, and certain herbs have mild antibacterial properties. But these are mixed in with useless or harmful treatments. Ground unicorn horn, actually gnarled tusk, expensive and inert, dried animal parts, and bizarre concoctions based on astrological timing. Prayer and pilgrimage. When medicine fails, turn to God. The castle chapel is full of people praying for healing. Relics bones, or possessions of saints, are believed to have curative powers. If you're desperately ill, you might be sent on pilgrimage to a holy site, because clearly what a person with pneumonia needs is to walk 100 miles. Amputation. If you develop gangrene from an infected wound, the only treatment is to cut off the affected limb before infection spreads. This is done with a saw, without anesthesia beyond alcohol, or a leather strap to bite down on. According to medieval surgical texts, the amputation site is cauterized with a red-hot iron to stop bleeding. Survival depends on not going into shock and not developing infection afterward. Many don't survive. Castle physicians, if the Lord employs one, are educated in these methods and believe them to be cutting-edge medical science. They're not stupid. They're working with the best knowledge available, which is unfortunately based on theories that are completely wrong. Most castle inhabitants never see a physician. They rely on folk remedies, the advice of older women with herbal knowledge, prayer, and luck. If you get sick, you either recover naturally or you don't. Your immune system is your only real defense, and it's already compromised by malnutrition, stress, and constant exposure to pathogens. You lie on your pallet in the great hall, fever burning, body aching, hoping that whatever this is will pass. Around you, other people cough, sneeze, and suffer. The air is thick with disease, and you realize that surviving manual labor, cold, hunger, and brutality means nothing if a microscopic organism you can't see, understand, or fight decides to kill you. Let's say, hypothetically, that your terrible day in the castle takes an even worse turn. The castle is attacked. Maybe it's a raid by a rival lord. Maybe it's a full siege. Either way, you're about to discover that castle warfare is nothing like the movies suggest. First, understand what a siege actually means. An attacking army surrounds the castle, cuts off all supply lines, and waits for the defenders to run out of food, water, or hope. According to military historians studying medieval warfare, sieges could last months or even years. The siege of Chateau Galliard in 1203 to 1204 lasted 6 months. The siege of Harlech Castle in Wales during the 1460s lasted 7 years. During a siege, you're trapped inside stone walls with hundreds or thousands of other people, watching supplies dwindle while disease spreads and hope dies. Your role in the defense? You're not a trained soldier, so you're not manning the walls with sword and armor. You're hauling rocks to the battlements so defenders can drop them on attackers. You're carrying buckets of water to put out fires started by flaming arrows. You're helping to repair damaged walls and gates. You're nursing wounded soldiers. You're cooking ever smaller portions from shrinking food stores. And you're waiting. Medieval siege tactics are designed to make life inside the castle unbearable. Attackers might cut off water supplies. If the castle relies on an external source, that's the first target. Wells inside the walls become critical. If they run dry or become contaminated, everyone inside faces dehydration. Launch diseased animals over the walls. Yes, early biological warfare. Trebuchets and catapults fling dead horses, cows, or human corpses into the castle, spreading disease and demoralizing defenders. The stench alone is overwhelming. Use starvation. This is the most common siege tactic. Just wait. Eventually, the castle runs out of food. According to records from medieval sieges, defenders often ate horses, dogs, cats, rats, and eventually leather goods boiled to extract any nutritional value. When those run out, people start dying of starvation. Undermine walls. Sappers dig tunnels beneath castle walls, prop them up with wooden supports, then set the wood on fire, causing the tunnel to collapse and the wall above to fall. Defenders try to countermine, digging their own tunnels to intercept attackers. Underground fighting is claustrophobic, terrifying, and often ends with tunnels collapsing on everyone inside. Assault with siege weapons. Trebuchets launch massive stones weighing 200 to 300 pounds at walls, towers, and gates. Battering rams huge logs with metal tips, often covered with protective roofs, pound gates until they splinter. Siege towers, wooden structures on wheels, as tall as the castle walls, allow attackers to approach and fight at wall-top level. Inside the castle, conditions deteriorate rapidly. Food rationing. Within weeks of a siege beginning, food is strictly rationed. The lord and his knights get priority. Soldiers get enough to maintain strength. Everyone else, including you, gets subsistence rations that barely keep you alive. Children, elderly, and useless mouths, non-combatants who consume resources without contributing to defense, might be forced out of the castle to reduce the number of people drawing on supplies. Attackers often refuse to let them pass, leaving them to die in the no-man's land between castle and siege lines. Disease outbreaks. Close quarters, malnutrition, stress, and poor sanitation create perfect conditions for disease. Dysentery is almost inevitable. Typhoid spreads. Any communicable illness becomes an epidemic. Bodies pile up faster than they can be buried or burned. Psychological warfare. Attackers shout threats, taunt defenders, display captured prisoners being tortured or executed. They might parade the heads of defeated soldiers on pikes. All of this is designed to break morale. Internal conflict. As conditions worsen, people inside the castle turn on each other. Accusations of hoarding food, conspiracy, or cowardice lead to violence. The social order breaks down. Desperate people do desperate things. If the castle walls are breached by mining, battering, or successful assault, what follows is brutal. The laws of war in the medieval period are clear but grim. A besieged fortress that surrenders before walls are breached might negotiate favorable terms. Defenders might be allowed to leave with their lives and possessions. But a fortress that forces attackers to take it by storm forfeits mercy. Once attackers breach the walls, they're legally and customarily permitted to sack the castle, killing defenders, looting property, and committing atrocities. This isn't an unfortunate side effect of war. It's an accepted part of medieval military practice, designed to incentivize surrender. You, as a low-ranking servant, are not combatant, but you're not safe either. Attacking soldiers don't distinguish between armed defenders and unarmed servants when they're caught up in the heat of battle. You're likely to be killed, injured, or captured for ransom if someone thinks you're worth anything or slavery. Historical accounts of castle sackings are horrific. After the siege of Jerusalem in 1099 during the First Crusade, Crusaders slaughtered an estimated 60,000 people, soldiers and civilians alike. The sack of Béziers in 1209 during the Albigensian Crusade resulted in the massacre of 20,000 people. Castle sieges on smaller scales followed similar patterns. And if you survive the initial assault, you face aftermath challenges. No food. Attackers loot everything. No shelter. Sections of the castle are destroyed. No protection. The lord who ruled you is probably dead or captured. And no future. You're now living in a war zone with no resources or safety. So when you imagine medieval castle warfare, forget Hollywood's glorious battles. Picture yourself cold, starving, terrified, hauling stones up endless stairs while your friends die from disease, waiting for walls to collapse or gates to break, knowing that whether you survive depends less on courage or skill and more on whether attackers decide to show mercy. Spoiler, they usually don't. You might think, surely there must be some fun in medieval castle life? Some joy, some leisure, something to break up the monotony of suffering? Yes, entertainment exists in medieval castles. But like everything else, it's stratified by class, often violent and not as enjoyable as you'd hope. For the nobility, entertainment is a regular occurrence. Feasting. Not everyday dinner, but special celebrations. Christmas, Easter, weddings, military victories. These multi-hour events feature elaborate courses, entertainment, excessive drinking, and spectacle. Servants like you prepare and serve the food, but don't participate in the enjoyment. You watch the nobility gorge themselves on roasted meats, sweetmeats, exotic fruits, and fine wines while you wait to eat their leftovers. Feasts are displays of wealth and power, reminding everyone who has abundance and who doesn't. Hunting. The lord and his knights ride out with hounds to chase deer, boar, foxes, or wolves. Hunting is sport, status symbol, and food procurement combined. According to forest laws, only nobility can hunt in royal forests. Peasants caught poaching face mutilation or execution. You might be conscripted as a beater, driving game toward the hunters, or working in the kitchens to prepare whatever is killed. Medieval hunting is dangerous. People are gored by boars, thrown from horses, or accidentally shot by crossbows. But for those who survive, it's thrilling excitement unavailable to commoners. Hawking and falconry, a refined form of hunting using trained birds of prey. Extremely expensive. A good falcon costs more than a horse. This is pure nobility leisure. You might help care for the birds, feeding them, cleaning their mews, housing, assisting during hunts, but you never fly them yourself. Tournaments. Mock battles where knights compete for honor, glory, and prizes. Early medieval tournaments are barely controlled warfare. Knights in full armor charge each other with lances, swords, maces, and axes. People die regularly. By the later Middle Ages, tournaments become more regulated, with blunted weapons and rules, but they're still violent. Successful knights win fame and fortune. Unsuccessful ones get broken bones, concussions, or death. As a servant, you're part of the tournament logistics, setting up pavilions, caring for horses, serving food to participants, and cleaning up afterward. You watch from the sidelines while knights clash for glory you'll never have. Music and minstrels. The Great Hall hosts performances, singers, musicians playing lutes, harps, and fiddles, storytellers reciting epic poems and romances. Talented performers travel between castles, offering news and entertainment. Some songs are religious hymns, others are courtly love ballads or bawdy humor. The nobility enjoys this during feasts. You hear it while serving or cleaning. If you're musically gifted, you might perform for scraps and small coins, but most servants just listen while working. Games. The nobility plays chess, a marker of sophistication and strategy. Backgammon, dice games, and early card games. These often involve gambling money, possessions, even land changes, hands over gain outcomes. Heated disputes and accusations of cheating are common. You're not invited to play with nobles, though servants might have their own simpler games during rare free moments. Dancing. During festivals and celebrations, people dance, nobles performing elaborate courtly dances with complex steps and formations, commoners doing simpler folk dances. Dancing is one of the few activities that crosses class boundaries slightly, though nobles and servants don't dance together. If you're young and energetic, dancing offers rare physical joy, but you're usually too exhausted from labor to have energy for vigorous dancing. For you and fellow servants, entertainment is significantly more limited. Gossip, the primary entertainment of the lower classes. Who's sleeping with whom? Which night is cruel? What happened in the kitchen today? Gossip travels through the castle faster than any official announcement, and it's free entertainment that requires only time and listeners. Be careful, though wrong gossip reaching wrong ears can get you punished for slander. Drinking. Ale is available, and getting drunk offers temporary escape from misery. People drink heavily during festivals and their rare free time. Drunkenness leads to fights, poor decisions, and hangovers that make tomorrow's work even more unbearable, but in the moment, it numbs the pain. Religious festivals. Holidays provide breaks from work and communal celebration. Christmas, Easter, Midsummer, and harvest festivals involve special meals, temporary relaxation of rules, and entertainment. Mumming, simple costumed performances, mystery plays, biblical stories dramatized by townspeople, and communal dancing offer rare joy. But these are infrequent, perhaps a dozen times a year, and they're still controlled by church and nobility. Dice and simple games. Servants gamble with dice, play knucklebones, similar to jacks, or simple board games scratched into wooden surfaces. Stakes are low pennies, food shares, small favors, because no one has much to wager. Church authorities discourage gambling as sinful, but people do it anyway. Sports and rough games. On holidays, young men might engage in brutal sports, folk football, an anarchic mob game involving hundreds of players and few rules. Wrestling, quarterstaff fighting, or stone-throwing contests. These games are violent, injuries are common, and deaths occur. But for young men with no other outlet for physical aggression and competitive spirit, they're thrilling. Stories and songs. Around evening fires, or while working, people tell stories, folk tales, ghost stories, legends of saints and heroes. Those with good memories recite epic poems. Others sing work songs to make labor pass faster. This oral tradition is how culture transmits in an illiterate society. The stories are often dark, violent, and moralistic cautionary tales about people who sinned and faced divine punishment, or heroes who achieved glory through violence. Sex. Yes, people have sex, and for many, it's one of the few physical pleasures available. But medieval sexuality is complicated by church teachings. Sex outside marriage is sinful. Sex even within marriage is regulated. Certain positions are prohibited. Certain days are forbidden. Lack of privacy. You're sleeping in communal spaces where others can hear and see. Disease. STIs are common and untreatable. And consequences. Pregnancy without modern medicine is often fatal for women. Prostitution exists in castles, and nearby towns have brothels or independent sex workers. Church authorities condemn it, while simultaneously tolerating it as a necessary evil to prevent worse sins like homosexuality or rape. Prostitutes face social stigma, but provide services men and some women seek. Same-sex relationships exist, but are extremely dangerous. According to medieval law and church teaching, homosexual acts are serious sins punishable by death burning at the stake in some jurisdictions. People engaging in same-sex relationships must hide completely, living in constant fear of discovery. Now let's talk about the darker forms of entertainment. Public punishments. As discussed in the punishment chapter, executions, floggings, and humiliations are public spectacles. People gather to watch criminals punished, heretics burned, and accused witches drowned. This is considered both justice and entertainment, a moral lesson delivered with visceral impact. Children attend. People bring food. They cheer when the condemned suffer. It's barbaric by modern standards, but medieval people see it as righteous entertainment and community bonding through shared witness of justice. Bear baiting and animal fighting. Bears, bulls, or other animals are chained and set upon by dogs while crowds watch and bet on outcomes. The animals suffer terribly, torn by teeth, bleeding, terrified while spectators cheer. This is considered legitimate entertainment. According to historical records, these events draw large crowds and are popular across all classes. Cruelty for amusement. Medieval humor is often cruel. People laugh at others' misfortune watching someone slip and fall, mocking physical disabilities, ridiculing people who are different. Jesters and fools make jokes at others' expense. Practical jokes can be vicious, tricking someone into eating something disgusting, causing minor injuries, humiliating people publicly. There's little concept of too far. As long as the victim is lower status, almost anything is acceptable. Fighting and brawling. Men fight constantly over insults, debts, romantic rivals, or just because they're drunk and bored. These aren't friendly sparring. They're genuine fights with fists, knives, clubs, whatever's available. Serious injuries result. People die. But for young men with no other outlet for aggression and few consequences for violence against social equals, fighting is recreation. The crucial point: medieval entertainment reflects medieval values. Violence is normal and entertaining. Suffering of humans and animals is amusing. Hierarchy is reinforced. Even in leisure, nobles have refined pleasures. Commoners have crude ones. Sex is simultaneously desired and condemned. Alcohol is both medicine and vice. For you, entertainment is rare and unsatisfying. You're too exhausted most days to enjoy anything. When you do have free time, perhaps a few hours on Sunday afternoon or during a major festival, you're too drained to do more than sit, doze, or engage in minimal activity. The constant physical and psychological stress has depleted your capacity for joy. Your entertainment options are limited by poverty. No money for gambling or drinking much. Social restrictions. Can't participate in noble activities. And lack of free time. Always work to do. What little pleasure you might find: a song, a story, a rare good meal, a moment of human connection, is fleeting and overshadowed by the return to misery. Medieval people don't expect happiness. They're taught that earthly life is a vale of tears, that suffering is God's plan, that true joy waits in heaven if you're worthy. Entertainment isn't about sustained happiness or fulfillment. It's about brief distraction from hardship. So yes, there's entertainment in medieval castle life, but it's violent, cruel, stratified, and insufficient to make up for the grinding misery of daily existence. You might laugh at a joke, enjoy a song, or feel momentary excitement during a festival. Then you return to your cold sleeping spot on the floor, your empty stomach, your aching body, and the certain knowledge that tomorrow brings more of the same. The entertainment doesn't save you. It just reminds you what you're missing. Let's review your day. You woke up on a filthy floor, surrounded by strangers, in a building designed to resist military attacks rather than provide comfort. You relieved yourself in a hole that drops waste down the exterior wall. You choked down pottage and rock-hard bread. You drank weak beer because the water would kill you. You worked for 12 hours doing back-breaking manual labor hauling water, chopping wood, mucking stables, whatever the castle needed for minimal pay and no appreciation. You froze in winter, sweltered in summer, and itched constantly from parasites living in your clothes and on your skin. You ate dinner from a wooden bowl while standing at the periphery of the great hall, watching the nobility feast on food you prepared. You slept in communal spaces with no privacy, surrounded by smoke, disease, and the sounds of hundreds of people coughing, snoring, and suffering. And through it all, you were one accusation, one infection, one bad decision away from punishment, disease, or death. Here's the truth. You wouldn't last 24 hours in a medieval castle. Not because your weak modern people aren't inherently softer than medieval people, but because you lack the specific adaptations that medieval humans developed over lifetimes of hardship. Your immune system isn't prepared. Medieval people were constantly exposed to pathogens from childhood. Many died, but survivors developed immune responses to common illnesses. You, arriving from the modern world with an immune system trained on sanitized environments, would be vulnerable to diseases that medieval children survived. That minor illness spreading through the castle could kill you within days. Your body isn't conditioned. Medieval laborers developed physical adaptations from years of manual work-stronger muscles, denser bones, higher pain tolerance. You, even if you exercise regularly, haven't spent your life hauling 100-pound loads of spiral staircases or swinging an axe for hours. Within a day, you'd be injured, exhausted, or both. Your psychology isn't hardened. Medieval people accepted suffering as normal. They didn't expect comfort, fairness, or control over their lives. You, raised with expectations of safety, autonomy, and basic dignity, would be psychologically destroyed by the arbitrary brutality, constant hierarchy reinforcement, and complete lack of agency. The mental toll might break you before the physical conditions kill you. Your knowledge is useless. You know about germ theory, but you can't make antibiotics. You understand democracy, but you're living under feudal autocracy. You have modern sensibilities about human rights, but you're in a world where violence is casual and life is cheap. Your knowledge of how things should be only makes the reality more unbearable. You don't have support networks. Medieval castle inhabitants had families, communities, and shared cultural understanding. They knew the unspoken rules, the subtle hierarchies, the ways to survive. You're an outsider who doesn't understand the social dynamics and has no one to protect or guide you. In a world where relationships mean survival, you'd be isolated and vulnerable. You can't escape. Even if you wanted to leave, where would you go? The world outside the castle is even more dangerous bandits, war bands, wild animals, exposure, starvation. Medieval roads are barely maintained paths through wilderness. Villages are suspicious of strangers. You have no money, no skills that translate to medieval economy, and no legal status. Leaving the castle is likely a death sentence. The romanticized version of medieval castle life: noble knights, lavish feasts, courtly love, chivalric honor is a fantasy constructed centuries later by people who never experienced the reality. The truth is cold stone, empty stomachs, arbitrary violence, endemic disease, and grinding daily survival. Medieval castles were not homes. They were military installations that incidentally housed people, and those people suffered in ways modern minds can barely comprehend. The lord in his chamber might have had a slightly better experience, with private rooms, better food, and some luxury, but even he dealt with cold, disease, and the constant threat of violence. For everyone else, the servants, laborers, soldiers, and you, life in a medieval castle was an endurance test that never ended. You worked until your body gave out. You suffered because suffering was the default state. You lived because you were too stubborn to die. And then one day you weren't, and someone else took your place hauling the same water up the same stairs. So here you are, reading this from the comfort of wherever you happen to be. Maybe you're in a heated room. Maybe you have clean water running from a tap. Maybe you've eaten 3 meals today without worrying about whether your food is contaminated or your water is full of parasites. Take a moment to appreciate the mundane miracles of modern life. Sanitation. You can use a toilet that flushes. You can wash your hands with soap and running water. You can shower with hot water whenever you want. These aren't luxuries. They're basic public health infrastructure that has saved more lives than any medical breakthrough. The average medieval person would see your bathroom as incomprehensible magic. Medicine. You can treat infections with antibiotics. You can cure diseases that killed millions in the Middle Ages. You can manage pain without resorting to alcohol and prayer. You can undergo surgery with anesthesia and sterilization. Modern medicine is absolutely miraculous compared to medieval humoral theory, bloodletting, and hope. Food security. You can eat whenever you're hungry. You have refrigeration. It keeps food safe for days or weeks. You have access to diverse, nutritious food year-round from around the world. You're not rationing grain to survive winter or wondering if this year's harvest will be enough. When you open your refrigerator and complain there's nothing to eat, you're standing in front of more food variety and abundance than a medieval lord saw in a year. Safety and justice. You're not at the mercy of arbitrary violence from people above you in a rigid hierarchy. You have legal rights, due process, and protections. Violence, while still present, is no longer the primary enforcement mechanism of society. You can't be executed for poaching a rabbit or have your hand cut off for stealing bread. Due process isn't perfect, but it exists. Comfort. You control your environment heating, cooling, lighting at the flip of a switch. You sleep on mattresses designed for comfort, with clean sheets you can wash whenever you want. You wear clean clothes that fit properly and don't give you rashes. You can be warm in winter and cool in summer. Your feet don't ache from walking on stone floors all day. Your back doesn't break from constant manual labor. Freedom. You can choose your work, your relationships, your beliefs. You're not bound by feudal obligations to a lord who owns your labor and controls your life. You can quit a job, change careers, move to a different city. You can marry whom you choose, or not marry at all. You can practice your religion, or practice no religion. These freedoms would be inconceivable to medieval people trapped in rigid social hierarchies. Education and literacy. You can read this. That simple fact puts you ahead of 90% of medieval people who were illiterate and had no access to education. You can learn about anything you want through books, internet, schools. Knowledge isn't locked away in Latin texts controlled by clergy. You're not dependent on authorities to interpret reality for you. Life expectancy. You're likely to live into your 70s or 80s. Medieval. People who survived childhood might reach 50 or 60 if lucky, but most didn't make it that far. You'll probably never watch half your children die in infancy, never lose your teeth by 30, never die from an infected scratch. The simple fact that you're likely to see your grandchildren grow up is a modern miracle. Entertainment and connection. You can watch movies, listen to music from any era, communicate instantly with people worldwide, access the accumulated knowledge and art of human civilization from your pocket. Medieval people had traveling minstrels, occasional festivals, and stories told around fires. You have infinity. Medieval people weren't stupid or primitive. They were humans doing their best with limited technology, poor understanding of disease, violent social structures, and harsh environments. They developed complex cultures, created magnificent art and architecture, told beautiful stories, and found meaning in difficult lives. They loved their children, formed friendships, fell in love, laughed at jokes, took pride in their work, and hoped for better futures. They were fully human, with the same emotional range and intellectual capacity as modern people. But their lives were hard in ways that would destroy most of us. The grinding poverty, the casual brutality, the endemic disease, the hierarchical oppression, the complete lack of agency, the bone-deep cold, the constant hunger, the exhausting labor, the parasites, the pain, all of it combined into an existence that modern people simply aren't equipped to endure. We're softer, yes, but that's not weakness, it's progress. We're not hardened against suffering because we've built systems that reduce suffering. Our bodies aren't conditioned for manual labor because we've created tools and machines. Our immune systems aren't battle-hardened because we've developed sanitation and vaccines. Our psyches aren't numb to brutality because we've built societies with less violence and more protection. The fact that you wouldn't last 24 hours in a medieval castle isn't a personal failing. It's evidence of how far humanity has come. You're adapted for a different world with antibiotics and anesthesia, with human rights and rule of law, with warmth and comfort and security. So tonight, when you climb into your comfortable bed in your climate-controlled room, after eating a meal you chose from abundant options, after using a bathroom that doesn't drop waste down the exterior wall, after spending your day doing work you chose rather than toil assigned by birth, take a moment to feel genuine gratitude. Not performative gratitude, not kids in Africa guilt trip gratitude, but deep, sincere appreciation for the accumulated improvements of centuries of human effort. Every modern convenience you enjoy represents someone's innovation, someone's labor, someone's fight for better conditions. The medieval world was real. Millions lived it. Many survived it. But you, with your modern sensibilities, immune system, and expectations, you wouldn't last 24 hours. And that's not a judgment on you. It's a testament to how far we've come. It's proof that progress, despite its imperfections and costs, has fundamentally improved the baseline of human existence. Your medieval ancestors suffered, so you don't have to. Honor their memory by appreciating what they didn't have, by recognizing the privilege of modernity, and by working to ensure that future generations have it even better than you do. Because that's what progress means. Each generation enduring less suffering and experiencing more flourishing than the last. Your great-grandchildren might read about your life and think, I couldn't survive 24 hours in their world. And that would be beautiful evidence that humanity kept climbing, kept improving, kept reducing the sum total of human suffering. So stay warm, stay clean, stay healthy. Stay grateful you're living in the 21st century and not the 14th. And maybe, just maybe, do something today to make tomorrow a little bit better for someone else. Because that's how we got here, one improvement at a time, one innovation, one act of kindness, one reduction in suffering. The castle walls have fallen. The feudal lords are gone. The plagues are conquered. The hierarchies have loosened. And you get to live in the aftermath of all that progress. Don't waste it.